Hello, welcome everyone. As you join, we invite you to put where you're located and maybe a little bit about the yard you're designing in the chat. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. We've got a lot of folks coming today, so I'm just giving it a couple minutes to let everyone join and transition out of their days. Again, as you're joining, you're invited to put where you're located and a little bit about the yard you're transforming in the chat. Thanks, Katie. Forest Virginia, amazing. Formal native plant garden, great. Yes, exactly. You can make any style of garden out of native plants. So I love that you mentioned that it's a formal native garden. Welcome, everyone. Hi, Patrick from South Jersey. Reduce lawn and introduce more natives. Perfect. Nashville, Tennessee, North Carolina, Columbus, Ohio. Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Great. Great. Karen, I saw you said you're hoping to figure out how to have rooms. That's exactly what we're going to be talking today about. So this is fantastic. So welcome, everybody. Cape Cod, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Texas. This is great. So what we'll be talking about today is design. So we're not talking about specific plants, we are talking about design. And so this is absolutely for all of you and calling in from everywhere everyone's coming from. All right. All right. So I've got June here in the background who's going to be helping manage chat a little bit. We use chat throughout as reflection prompts as a way to help with your own learning. My first career was as a neuroscientist, so I'm very focused on what are the things that we can do to help you remember, because there's a lot of information today. So June will be here kind of just looking at the chat, and she'll put some links in towards the end. And then I've got Heather here. So with that, it's 5:32 Eastern time, and we're going to get started. So welcome, everyone. You're here because you've already taken a huge first step in the Less Lawn, More Life Challenge. You picked your spot. So tonight, we're going to help you take that spot and turn it into a real plan. So this is one that fits your life and brings more biodiversity to your yard. So for these first couple of minutes, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. So I'm Zoe Evans. Hi, I'm co-teaching tonight with my partner and mom, Heather Evans. And together we run Design Your Wild, which is a free newsletter for DIY rewilders. And I also coach through Planet Wild, which is the group behind the Less Lawn, More Life Challenge. And we're building new tools like the Wilder Score to support your journey. And we're going to share links for all of this at the end. So why does this workshop exist? We know that redesigning a yard can feel overwhelming. The budget, time, and decisions is a lot. So this workshop will help you start creating a layout that supports your goals, fits your life, and then also sets you up to be a thoughtful steward of your land over time. And we've consolidated the first 6 weeks of a longer course into 90 minutes. So this is going to be fast paced and hands-on. There's sketching, visualizing, and reflecting. It will be recorded, so you'll be able to watch it again later at your own speed if you need. A couple quick notes before we dive in. So grab your aerial photo or parcel map, or if you don't have that on hand, just sketch your property from above from memory. If you have a big property, we recommend focusing on about 1/3 of an acre around your house. You'll see why as we get into it. Please have thick markers and not pencils or a tablet. And don't worry about being neat. This is an exploration. It's not precision, and actually neatness can get in the way of creativity. So find some thick-tipped drawing tools. And then, as I said earlier, we're going to prompt you to use the chat throughout the workshop. Please reflect in the chat, and it doesn't even have to be full sentences. This is for you, not for us. And you're welcome to engage with each other as well. We're big fans of having live chat. That said, we are not going to have much time for live questions tonight, but we do want to hear from you. So you can use the Q&A window anytime to share what you're wondering, and we'll read through all of them after the workshop. And if your question is about layout or design strategy, we might feature it in our Design Your Wild newsletter. And so that's the way that you can get answers specifically to the questions that come up during this. So we'll give you a link to that at the end, and you can sign up and then keep an eye on your inbox to see us answer your question. And again, don't worry if you miss anything. The workshop is going to be recorded and we'll send it out later this week. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Heather, my mom.
Hi, I'm Heather. Zoe mentioned that our approach is human-centered, and that's because we want your yard to restore you, not just support wildlife. So we know from research that even a short daily walk around your yard, just 2 to 5 minutes, can improve both physical and mental health. And I personally take one every morning at a minimum after breakfast, and I highly recommend building that kind of a habit. So our goal is to help you sketch a layout that draws you and your loved ones outside, so your yard becomes a place you actually enjoy spending time. And I'm going to be referring throughout to the work of Doug Kent at the Lyle Center for Regenerative Studies. So he did research that explores what makes outdoor spaces truly restorative. Not just beautiful or functional, but places that people are drawn to. So Kent found that plants engaging your senses and water that's audible and within reach do matter. But even more powerful are structures that shape the way we move and feel in a space. So that's what we're going to be focusing on today. You'll sketch elements like paths, views to destinations, pause points, enclosure, and shade. And believe it or not, we're going to do that all in this 90 minutes. These are the features that invite people to explore, pause, and stay. So your layout's going to map where you want to walk, sit, eat, and play. And everything else, everywhere else, that's where the native plants go. So you're going to hear us mention Design Your Wild, the newsletter Zoe and I write, where we go deeper into this kind of design process for ecological yards. So if you find today's workshop helpful, we hope you'll join us there. And now, to help you start imagining what's possible in your space, I'm going to hand it back to Zoe for a quick visualization exercise. Zoe, take it away.
Thanks, Heather. So for this part, we're going to do a couple minutes of a guided visualization. It's kind of like a meditation. And the idea is that imagining is so critical here. So it helps widen the options in your brain and it gives a sense of possibilities. So go along with the ride, let my words kind of come in like a dream and see where your brain takes you. So go ahead and close your eyes if that feels comfortable, or you could just soften your gaze and take a deep breath in and out, starting to arrive in this place. So before we start drawing anything, we're going to imagine it. Start at the edge of your home. Maybe you're stepping out on a back door or onto a porch. You're heading into the yard that you want to create. So not the one that's there now, but the one that's possible. As you step forward, you're on some kind of path. To your left, you pass a sunny patch filled with blooms. You see movement, a butterfly lifting off, a bee dipping into a flower. You keep walking. There's a small bench tucked under a tree, just enough shade to sit with a book or watch the birds. Farther ahead, maybe there's a place to gather, a table, a couple of chairs, or even a hammock. And around the edges, you notice taller plants giving some privacy, a mix of native shrubs and trees swaying in the breeze. You can hear birdsong, the rustle of leaves, maybe even water, a small bubble or fountain. You glance around. This space feels organized, inviting, and alive. Everything has a place and it fits together. You want to stay here. So this is the beginning of your design, not just picking the plants, but thinking about where things go so that your yard becomes a place that works for both you and for wildlife. And that's what we're starting with today. So go ahead and open your eyes. And we're going to help you sketch a simple plan that captures this kind of movement, flow, and feel. Before we get into that, I'm going to talk briefly about why we're all into native plants. So give me a moment while I share my screen. And oops, 1 second. Okay. All right. So before we jump into design, let's ground ourselves in the why behind native plants. So they form the foundation of the food web. They're evolved alongside local insects, birds, and other wildlife, and many of these species can't survive without native plants. The biggest example is caterpillars. Most of our birds feed their babies insects, especially caterpillars, and our native plants, especially keystone species, are what those caterpillars need to survive. So when you plant natives, you're not just adding greenery, you're restoring the base of the food chain in your yard. As Doug Tallamy says, most of North America's terrestrial bird species, some 96%, rear their young on insects, not seeds or berries. And in most species, the majority of those insects are caterpillars or adult moths. And many caterpillars need woody plants. They need these host plants that they can eat the leaves of. Those are what rears them when they're in the caterpillar stage. So if we want our yards to support birds, we need caterpillars. And to support caterpillars, we need native plants, especially woodies. So today we're going to talk to you how to design a yard that works for you and biodiversity. And we'll be talking a lot about woody natives like shrubs and trees, which do a surprising amount of heavy lifting, both for design and for ecology. So you've already picked a spot for the Less Lawn, More Life challenge, and that's a powerful starting point. But many of you are ready to go further. And you're not just transforming one corner, you're starting to see your whole yard differently. So this workshop's going to help you step back and look at the big picture. We're going to guide you through a process about how to think about using the entire space. And this is not just what you might do now, it's what you're going to prioritize next fall or next year. By having this layout, it gives you a plan to work towards, even if you change the layout. So by the end of today, you'll have a clear first draft plan that connects your spot to the larger vision. And again, this is one you can implement over time at your own pace with consideration for your budget, energy, and goals. It's so that you don't put a tree in the place that you eventually want a shed or a pool or something else. And doing it this way also sets you up to become a true steward of your land, somebody who thinks about your land over time and not just in this moment of what we are trying to impose on it right now. Because the best yards aren't just full of life, they're places where you as a human actually want to be. So that's where design comes in. It's not just what you plant, but how you shape the space. And honestly, how you arrange the plants within that space, the planting plan, is much less important than the overall structure that the plants are filling in, the layout. So Heather's going to walk us through the layout principles of a restorative landscape and show how to create a yard that supports both biodiversity and your daily life.
Right, thank you, Zoe. So it's true, a yard full of native plants can support incredible biodiversity, but unless it's a place that you actually want to spend time in, it won't become part of your daily life. So that's where layout matters. So Doug Kent's research shows that the features that make a yard feel welcoming and restorative aren't just about the plants. They're things like paths, destinations, and a sense of enclosure. Together, these elements create what he calls a restorative landscape. I'm going to walk you through each of these in a moment, but first let me show you how they can completely transform a space. So I'm going to show you 3 views of the same long, narrow yard in Scotland. So this is a very small yard, by the way. And so for those of you who have small yards, many of my examples are, but this applies to bigger and smaller yards. So on the left is a typical urban yard. And unless you're 4 years old, there's not much to draw you into it. In the middle is the first stage of transforming this yard, adding paths and destinations. So for paths, the owner, and this is a DIY garden, created turf and cobblestone paths, including a loop so that they can walk around this long, narrow yard and not just up and back. And for destinations, she added a shed at the back right, several seating areas, and a fountain. So the right size shows the garden fully established. And you can see what I mean about how the paths and destinations draw you into the yard in the way the turf did not. So really contrast the left and the right and think about which one do you really want to go, pulls you in. And by the way, I also want you to notice how the tall, dense plantings can actually make the yard feel bigger instead of smaller. So by using tall plants to hide the wall, the owner blurred the boundaries, as landscape designers say. And in fact, it now looks as if the trees in the yard next door are part of the same property. And that's what's called borrowed landscape. I'm going to come back to the concepts of blurring boundaries and borrowing landscapes later when we talk about enclosure. So this garden shows how paths, destinations, and enclosure come together, even in a very small yard, to create a place where you want to spend time. But let's take them one at a time. All right, you're going to make the best use of your lot if you can create reasons to visit all of it and paths to take you there, preferably creating a loop around your backyard or, if possible, around your entire house. A lawn offers infinite choices for moving through it. Okay, but too much choice and open space is overwhelming instead of drawing people into it. Open lawn is often viewed from the safety of a patio. So in designing an ecological landscape filled with plants, you're going to be intentional about creating ways to move through the space, often paths, as well as destinations to draw you through it. So you're going to design paths to direct how you and your visitors experience views, both near and far, by directing where you walk and what your gaze encounters. And I hope you got a sense of that from Zoe's visualization exercise. This picture here shows how a Rhode Island homeowner drew visitors into a woody area where nobody would otherwise go. All she did was add a narrow, naturalistic wood chip path and a couple of rocking chairs. And this path, by the way, is less than 2 feet wide, and that works well for intimate subsidiary paths. For your main path, like the one circling your yard, 3 or 4 feet is generally a good width. For most of us, the paths will be turf. It's really turf that you already have in your yard. So instead of focusing on how we replace turf completely, we focus on limiting the amount of turf to these paths and destinations. In regions where there isn't enough rainfall to support turf without irrigation, you may choose pea gravel or other materials for your paths. If parts of your yard are inaccessible, for example, with a steep slope that nobody wants to walk up or down, you might add steps or a bridge. Both the cobblestone steps at the left and the wood bridge on the right are relatively inexpensive solutions to making unused areas of a yard more accessible. But as you saw in the example of the wood chip path in the woods, it helps to add something to draw you down the path, what I'm calling a destination. So often the simplest sure thing destination is a place to sit. And if you get anything out of this workshop, I hope you think about creating places to sit, in various parts of your yard. Doug Kent found that even if you have a bench on the side of a path, even if no one uses it, people felt a greater sense of comfort and enjoyment in the overall space. So you can fit several seating areas in even the smallest yard. In this small London garden by Stefano Marinaz, you can see a table and chairs beside a grill in the middle on the left, and then a lounging area in the very back. And I believe that there were also a couple of chairs in the foreground that you can't see. Now I'm going to show you, in a while, I'm going to show you a case study of how we transformed a yard with nothing but a bunch of furniture that we scored off of Facebook Marketplace. But here, let's talk about, just look at some images to get you excited about how you can create comfort in your yards. Cafe tables on the left can fit into very small nooks. Benches create that sense that there's an opportunity to relax, even if no one uses them. And I'm a huge fan of Adirondack chairs, particularly this idea of pops of color. Kent's research also found that thermal options, having sun and different seating in both sun and shade, is a top 10 attribute of a restorative landscape. So try to have seating in both sunny and shady areas. Personally, I love sun lounges. They really telegraph that idea of comfort. And a fire pit, like the circular one on the right here, is another seating area that gives a thermal option. But now let's dream bigger, okay, beyond seating. What will draw you into your yard? Maybe it's a lovely pergola or a summer house like the one that you see here, a shed for an office or gym or workshop. You don't have to build these now. That's what's so important about planning. The idea of designing is to plan for the future. Planning prevents you from planting a tree in the ideal place for the shed you'll eventually build, as Zoe pointed out earlier. So let's look at just so quickly at some other possible destinations. Game areas, think badminton, basketball, bocce, croquet, volleyball, putting, cornhole, lawn bowling, or areas where your kids or grandchildren can climb or swing or make a fort, or a hot tub, a stock tank pool, a pond, a bubbler, or a bird bath. In fact, water is necessary for a certified wildlife habitat, and water, audible and within reach, is independently another of Kent's top 10 attributes of a restorative landscape. An edibles garden, whether a few pots of herbs or a large vegetable garden or small orchard, or a cutting garden, an area for exotic flowers grown just for cutting. I count these non-native gardens as destinations because I'm assuming that the rest of your yard is native plants. As Doug Tallamy's research shows, and Zoe talked about, yards with about 70% native vegetation supports nesting birds. So we want to strive for 2/3 for the birds in our plantings. Other plantings can be destinations too. One of our past students is creating a gorgeous wildflower labyrinth, for example. However, remember that paths and destinations are places for you to stroll or sit or play or garden, do your vegetable gardening, for example. But they're going to be surrounded by plants. So think of native plantings and the bees and butterflies they attract as artwork along your paths and around your seating areas. Or you might even think of it as your wallpaper. So everything around you will be native plants. So I like the word destination because it's really clear that it's something to go to or place that you want to go. But sometimes it's helpful to think about your destinations as rooms. And I know somebody put that in the chat at the beginning of this workshop. Garden rooms are a traditional design element, but I want you to think about now is how they function, how rooms pull together elements into a sense of the whole. The functional character of rooms also helps you decide where features belong. So for example, an outdoor dining area usually makes the most sense outside the door closest to the kitchen. And you'll want the grill in that area as well for easy access. In fact, I find having the grill right outside the door and then the seating a little further along works very well. So you can go in and out and get supplies. Rooms in simple intentional shapes also signal that you've arrived. So when we do our demos, you're going to see how starting with human spaces differs from starting with flower beds. When you start by adding beds, you often end up with oddly shaped spaces between them that aren't as comfortable for human visitors. So except in a very small garden, outdoor rooms are generally larger than indoor ones. And they're geometric shapes like rectangles and ovals and circles. When you do rectangles and ovals, the golden ratio creates an especially comfortable space. That would be one where one side is about 1.6 times the other. So I've run through these examples very quickly, and I'm hoping that they inspire you to add destinations to your yard. So I want you to take a few minutes to reflect and inspire each other. So in the chat, would you put one or several destinations that you'd like to add to your yard? What will you put at the farthest reach of your yard to get you and your household outside?
So this is one of those reflection opportunities. A frog pond. Thank you, Joan. A pond. This is on my list of things I want to add to my yard. I haven't done yet. A conversation pit, a workshop area for concreting and other crafts. These are fantastic. Pergola, a reading spot, a cutting garden, a bench under the trees, areas for bird watching, paths that lead to seating, a swing with pillows and a bubbling fountain. Fantastic. More beehives, a woodland garden at the back of the yard. Think about how you might add a little seating moment or something. A composting area, fantastic, Val. Yeah, having functional areas is also a reason to get out into the yard. So
Right.
dirty your brush pile. That's a really good point. Okay, these are fantastic. Keep going. We're gonna keep moving forward, but keep putting these in the chat because it's really important. It's gonna be important for our next exercise. All right. Okay, Heather, I'm gonna stop sharing and you're gonna start.
Right.
So Heather is going to get set up with her iPad. So we're going to do a couple live demos. So you remember earlier how Heather mentioned that we transformed a yard with nothing but a bunch of used furniture. It wasn't quite true. We also used flags and a lawnmower. And so we're actually going to live sketch that design and then give you a chance to do it. But Heather's going to get connected. So what we're going to show you is my sister's Lila's property, which we've shared about in the newsletter. Native plants are really a family affair here. Lila's property is about 1/3 of an acre, and the existing vegetation was mostly all grass with a few trees along the bottom edge of the road. So here you can see at the bottom, those were trees that are mostly on Lila's property, and on the left, there were some more trees. There were only 2 big trees on the property itself. Lila didn't want to spend a lot of money transforming her yard, so we decided to plan a couple of destinations focused on seeding and then seed everything else to make it a native meadow. And we also used 1 flat of plugs. So now I'm going to walk Heather through sketching a yard layout using the same steps that we're going to have you do next. So this is a topographic map that we downloaded from Lila's County Parcel Access website, and many of you will have access to something like this. On a topographic map, the dashed lines show slopes. So while Lila's 1/3 of an acre is relatively large, it has quite a few slopes, which really need to consider as we site the destinations. And Lila was not interested in investing in leveling any areas, so the rooms needed to be placed on already flat areas. So Heather, for this, can you get ready with your marker? And generally, you're not going to erase, except for one time when I tell you to. All right, so first, can you draw in any existing destinations or fixed elements that you need to consider? So these are things that definitely won't be moved. So Heather's adding in the driveway right now, which was missing from this map. And she's also going to add in there's a porch right next to the driveway. Great. And then in front of that porch, can you write S for septic? So if you have underground utilities or things like septic, that's super important to keep in mind. You don't want to put a tree with really woody roots over your septic system. Great. And then can you also indicate the 2 big trees on the property, the maple and the oak, since those are ones that are kind of in the way of the design or part of the design that we have to design for. Thank you. And the other one is right on the slope. All right, so now you're going to think about a circuit. So this is a nice walk around the house, not too close to the house, the road, that covers as much as of the property as is accessible. So Heather, can you draw a line so we can see what you're thinking? Starting at the driveway. And Lila's house sits right on the property line, the line of her neighbor's property. It's impressive how close they got. So the circuit can't go around the whole house, but it still covers most of the yard. So you can see how they managed to get this path that goes around most of the yard, and then it will go back into the front. All right, Heather, now erase that line. We'll add that in later. All right, so the next step is to identify 3 to 5 destinations you might place along the circuit. So for Lila, she really had nothing existing. She wanted seating close to the kitchen and office, sun lounge with area for playing lawn games, and a shaded seating area for hot days. So Heather, now you're going to sketch those rooms using rough shapes. Use a circle, oval, or square, and start with the existing destination. So can you can use green for this. And on that porch, can you just indicate that little table that we added to the porch? So this is a seating area that's right near the kitchen. Great. Now put the destination at the farthest edge of the circuit. So something on the top of that hill. That big flat space. Yeah, so great. So you can see how rough and messy Heather's doing with this. I want you all to do this as well. So that area is flat and it's large and it's sunny. Okay, now add a shaded seating area under the maple, the other kind of flat spot we've got. Great. And then now add a seating area close to the house right outside her office. Great. So there's a door that exits into the backyard there, and we want something to pull her out of her office. So when she's sitting there working, something gets her out. All right. Now, can you connect the rooms with paths to create the circuit? Starting at the driveway, running through all of the rooms. Great. So in most cases, the path should enter and exit from the room. Sometimes it will need to run alongside it, like if you're going into like a shed or a building, but generally it should go straight in like Heather did. So ta-da, great job, Heather. We've created a design. So there's some additional steps to test, refine, and add to it, but this is a great basic layout to start from. And it's very different from what Lila started out with, which is a bunch of grass, but it's kind of hard to visualize that with this negative space approach. So before we move on, it would be helpful to add a little more color. So Heather, can you use yellow? So we used green to show the rest of the turf. Can you use yellow now to show the meadow, to just all of the native plantings? So as Heather adds this in, you'll see that the green is the only mown turf grass that we're leaving behind, and it's the destinations and the paths. Everything else will eventually be planted, ideally with 2/3 for the birds or about 70% native species. So this is a really different process from starting with creating beds or pollinator patches first. When you install patches of vegetation, the leftover turf ends up in odd shapes that don't really create this feeling of a room. What creates the feeling of the room is really a geometric shape. So simple circles, squares, and ovals are going to be one of the best things that you can do. But also is filling it all in. So we're really reducing that amount of open space. And our goal is to create human-centered spaces within a wild yard with things to do in them. So these geometric shapes and clearly defined rooms are what communicate that sense of you have arrived, which is really critical to the feeling of restorativeness that we want from our designed yards. All right, now Heather is going to stop sharing and it's going to be your turn. So I'm going to put the instructions up on the screen. And all right, you're going to have just 5 minutes for this, and you can do it with a pen and paper or a tablet. Again, if you don't have a property photo, no problem. Just do a super quick sketch of the house and yard from above, and you can always go back and refine it later. So remember, be bold, be messy. You can't get this wrong. This is a draft. You're the only one who ever has to see it. And just go for it. So just like I did with Heather, I'll read the steps while you sketch, and you can follow along with me or move at your own pace. So number 1, start by drawing in any fixed elements or existing destinations that won't move. So this is things like your driveway, your garage, sheds, patios, mature trees. So indicate them, write your septic, super quick and messy. You're the only one who has to be able to read this. And for now, you can ignore the spot you chose for the challenge. You'll work that in later. So you're just focusing on those existing structures or mature trees or things that need to be considered as part of this design. All right, the next step, once you've done that, you might still be working on that, that's fine. You'll think about your circuit. So remember, this is a nice walk around your house and yard, not too close to the house or the road. And just lightly trace it in or imagine it for now. If you're stuck and you're feeling like, oh, there's too many options, just pick a loop or a winding route that hits most of your usable space. And this is a draft. You can always sketch new circuits later. And actually, we're going to encourage you after this workshop to go back and create a whole bunch of different designs, trying to as many different ways of using the space as possible. All right, so step 3 is to come up with 3 to 5 new destinations that would actually get you or your people outside more. So if you already have fixed destinations, like an outdoor patio with seating on it, that should be already shown in your plan. So you want 3 to 5 new destinations. If you're new to transforming your yard, this could be a sun lounge play area. So think about reducing your lawn to a room. That's a destination. You could start with seating. So if you don't have seating, start there. A sunny spot, a shady spot, a spot to eat. If you already have those, think about what everyone was saying in the chat. Maybe you want a fire pit, a pond, a veggie garden, a gym zone, an art shed. So think play, rest, gathering, work, wonder. Even if you have a very small yard, trust me, you can fit a lot of things into it. So now you're going to use the rough shapes to sketch your new room. So you're sticking to 3 to 5 new ones. Use circles, ovals, and rectangles. Don't be precise. And start with the destination at the furthest edge of your circuit. So even in a small yard, as Heather showed, a bench or a tiny table can work. So something really far at the furthest end of your circuit that gets you out. And you don't have to know exactly what's going to go there. Just use up, a bunch of space. And then you'll add in your other destinations. So try to create at least one in the sun and one in the shade. And if you don't have any shade because you have no trees on your property, let me tell you, that's a fantastic opportunity to add some trees. All right, so you're drawing your destinations in. Again, if you have a huge lawn and you have sun loungers there now, put a circle there or put a square, make that area smaller. All right, so the last step here is to connect the rooms with paths to complete your circuit. So the path should generally enter or exit each room. It may run alongside for structures, but generally path will enter and exit. And I see somebody said there are a lot of great trees, but no sun. That's okay. That's great. You trust me, the trees are the best thing you can have for carbon sequestration. They're fantastic for wildlife, and cooling is going to be a thing that we all want. So Melissa, I'm a little jealous of you. All right, we have 30 more seconds. Sketch your drawing. Again, you don't need to be attached to it. This is not one and done. This is an iterative process. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm seeing more people with a lot of trees. That's great. I'm so thrilled. All right, time's up, pens down. You just made your first layout. Whatever's on there, you did it. So looking at your plan, now imagine how everything that's not a destination or a path is going to get planted with native plants. So maybe some of those destinations become a little bigger. You want space. Like you'll see, I have a 50-foot wide circle lawn. So as you're imagining how everything that's not planted, that is not a destination or a path, gets planted with native plants, think about how if you chose a spot for Less Lawn, More Life challenge number 2, which you might recognize me from, go ahead and softly mark it now. So just kind of indicate where your spot is. And this is likely to become the first zone you rewild as part of your bigger plan. Or maybe you're already in your process and it's already there, but just indicate it. At the end, we're going to show you how to break out your overall layout into planting zones and start with that spot. It's your first zone. It's how you begin to bring the plan to life. So we're going to give you a chance to do another version in a bit. And later, we're going to recommend getting outside to walk it and see how it feels in real life. So to test layouts on the ground, we use landscape flags to mark paths and destinations. So you can see here how at Lila's house, we marked the path along the back of the house with a single row of flags, those little orange dots. But once we marked it out, it actually felt too cramped. So we moved it further back. A lot of people like to push their paths right next to the house. A good thing to do is have someone walk the path that you're creating and another person stand inside, and have the person inside notice when it feels like it's too much in their personal space. And then you want to push the path further out. So you want to have the person inside feel safe and protected, like the person outside can't really see everything that's going on. That's one way to think about spacing if you have options with that. So once we were happy with the location of the flags, we mowed a path that was about 2 lawnmowers wide. So as Heather mentioned earlier, you typically want primary paths to be about or at least 4 feet wide. And primary paths are the things that you're indicating to somebody who's never been to your property, this is where you should walk. And that should be really clear, and design is a way to tell them that even without words. So in just one weekend, we laid out and mowed all the paths and destinations that you saw in Heather's sketch. The following weekend, we planted a flat of black-eyed Susan plugs into the meadow areas, and then that fall, we seeded a native net meadow mix. And we subsequently replaced the chain link fence that you see behind that maple with a row of wax myrtles, and we added several more shrubs and trees to create a greater sense of enclosure. And we'll talk more about enclosure later. And we added furniture, which we scored for cheap on Facebook Marketplace, including some chairs under the tree facing this path. So furniture is a super important key to actually making that spot under the tree a destination instead of just yard. And the result was a delightful yard where Lila spends time working, sunning, and hanging out with friends. So you'll notice that this slide says in your yard, and there's going to be more of these throughout the workshop. So pay special attention to these slides. These are the steps that you'll do on your own time to test and refine your designs. So remember them, make a note, or just sort of review the recording after. And now I'm going to present another case study to introduce some concepts for you to apply in your next steps. So these are views, scale, and regulating lines. So kind of sad statistic is Americans spend only 8% of our time outside, and much of that time is spent walking between a car and a building. Hopefully we spend a little bit more time outside as gardeners, but views of our gardens can make our time inside the house more enjoyable. But they can also, and this is another kind of psychological trick, they can also draw us outside into the garden. So they can increase that 8% time. Design, as hopefully you've realized, is all about intentionality. And what we want you to take away from the discussion of views and focal points is that objects and key plants in your landscape are most effective when you place them somewhere for a purpose. We don't just put ornaments anywhere willy-nilly. Think a sculpture centered on a path. So one way of designing views into our landscapes is by centering a path, a tree, or seating on a window. So again, you can kind of see here how this path centered in this window in this photo actually invites and draws you outside. It makes you curious what's at the end of that. And so that's the type of thing that as you're creating your designs, you'll think about. Where are the views? Where are your paths? What are you looking at from both inside and outside? What do you want to look at? What do you not want to look at? All of that can be addressed with design. So in addition to views, scale is critical to good design. So making sure that spaces feel right. So not an open expanse of lawn that feels unenclosed, or a tiny area where you can't access the seating or play cornhole if you want to play cornhole there. So a lot of scale is figured out on the ground with flags and furniture testing. So you can not do so much with your layout and then you'll test it. So the last kind of concept here is regulating lines. So regulating lines is a tool that we use to figure out where to place our destinations. In this next demo, we're going to show you how I use views and regulating lines in siting the paths and destinations in my own yard. So with that, I'm going to pull up my iPad while Heather tells you what we'll be doing. How do I stop sharing?
Okay, so great. Thank you, Zoe. So just as we did before, we're going to walk you through the same steps that you're going to do in the next exercise. So I'm going to walk Zoe through it. And it's similar to what we did in the demo of Lila's yard, but in this case, we're going to be using regulating lines and views. So Zoe, here we are. This is Zoe's property. And we're going to start with regulating lines. So please draw lines extending from each wall of your house and from each of your doors, just straight lines, and draw them, essentially till you get to where you can't walk because the slope is too steep.
Oh, sorry, I just added. Okay, well, those were the doors that I added.
Okay, so now when you do the doors, what that establish is human scale. So that's about a 4-foot path and gives is a quick way to just get a sense of scale in your drawing. Regulating lines then are going to help you size and site your destinations in proportion to your house. And there's simply lines that you make, as you can see, by extending the walls of your house. And you can extend them as far as they can go within your lot. But because you can't see around those lines, they start to create natural rooms where you might site your destinations. Those of you with narrow urban backyards, we've shown you a couple of examples where the house extends from one side to the other. You can extend the lines from the edges of your first floor windows and doors to create regulating lines, or really kind of a sense of a grid. All right, Zoe has done that. Okay, I just realized, Zoe, I didn't ask you to put in the existing things, but we'll show that later. So step 2 is to indicate 2 or 3 key views with an X about 15 feet from the windows. All right, the location of the X is arbitrary here, but this is to remind us to think about the important views. So Zoe, would you explain the problem with the view in your backyard?
Yeah, so when I bought the house, and this photo was from then, there was a dog run that extended all the way here. And this line right here was right in the middle of my living room window. And there's absolutely nothing less inviting than having a fence centered on a window. And so I really wanted to move that. And I don't actually have a dog, but I wanted a dog area in case I needed it. I don't know. And so I wanted to move that to give myself more space, something more inviting to look at in that back window. So that's really what started all this.
Okay. So now you're going to just repeat the steps that you did in the last exercise, but using those view markers and the regulating lines to rethink your drawing. So first is to sketch the existing hardscaping outbuildings and destinations, or at least those that you're going to keep. So Zoe, you already added your front path. And you're not going to draw the existing patio because Zoe wanted a much larger entertaining area, more connected to her back door. So Zoe, would you just show?
By the way, this was the existing patio. It was very small. It was tucked in against the house. So there's nothing less private feeling than that. But it couldn't even fit a table for 6. So I wanted something much bigger and further and using the space. Like, why have it right next to the house?
So, and so Zoe, you've drawn in the
dog area, the new dog area.
Okay, and Zoe's using blue to indicate hardscaping. The new dog area actually uses 3 sides of the prior one, but so we moved that one wall so that, or one side of it, so that it doesn't interrupt her living room view. Zoe, would you please mark your septic system and just explain your thoughts on that? You could put an S there.
Yeah, so septic, you want to be careful not to plant woody rooted plants on it. So I want to be, and I have a very old septic system and I'm not trying to replace it sooner than I needed to. And so I don't want a lot of foot traffic on it. So I decided to put a septic friendly meadow on top of my septic area. And there's actually existing plants online that seed mixes that you can find for that. And so that was my goal, was to know where it is and not have people walk on it. So I want to walk around.
Thank you. And all right, now I want you to imagine your circuit. So the nice walk around your house, not too close to the house or too close to the road. So why don't you start from the driveway and draw a circuit past the front door and around your house. Right, so Zoe's using green here because the paths are going to be existing turf. Okay, and Zoe's going around her septic system, as you can see, and then around the back of the house and back to the driveway. Okay. Right? And Zoe has 1.5 acres. You can see that she can stroll around her entire property, which we couldn't do at Lila's. But she's going to be focusing on the 1/3 of an acre, which she just drew the circuit on. But later, she's also going to create paths into the woods. Sort of what we call subsidiary paths. All right, next, Zoe, let's sketch your room. So as we told you before, you all just imagined a path like Zoe drew, but we're going to start with the rooms, usually a circle or a square or a golden ratio, oval or rectangle to start with. So let's put a destination, and before you do it, so I want everybody to look in the furthest edge of your circuit. You see in the upper right, you can see that the grass forms a natural circle there. So Zoe, why don't you create a destination just as I created at Lila's by drawing a circular lawn there.
This was a sunny area, and seeing it from above really helped because there was already this natural curvature. And I wanted a big play area, A, because I had the space, B, because one of my many hobbies is archery, and I wanted an area where I can practice archery. So this area ends up being about a 50 square foot diameter circle, and I surrounded it by a border of plants in the mint family, which ticks don't like, and I'm in a heavy tick area. So that way I could have lawn, I could keep the ticks out from the forest, and have an area that I could put sun loungers in and do archery. Okay, go ahead.
All right, and Zoe, as I mentioned earlier, she wanted a large entertaining area, so a new patio essentially, with seating for 8 around a fire pit, a dining table, a grill, and a hot tub. So Zoe, tell us how you created the shape of the patio. And I think an important point here is that you're going to put 2 rooms essentially abutting each other. which is especially important in small gardens. And we'll talk later about how you turn them into distinct rooms.
Yeah.
So,
So, I wanted a big area. So Heather mentioned the golden ratio earlier. When I look at this space here is about 20 feet. A golden ratio for that would mean that the length, or the rest of it needs to be either shorter than that or 30 feet. So that's like 1.6 times it. So this ends up being about 30 feet. So I knew I wanted to fill most of that area. And then I just to decide on shape, I could have done an oval here. But looking at my house from above, you see this has this mid-century modern style of the L. And so I decided I actually wanted to do a kidney shape, which gave me a little bit more room and also kind of mimicked the design style of the house. So I ended up doing a shape kind of like this. It looks more kidney-like in real life. And then I connected it to my house with, and it's out of pea gravel because I wanted something kind of low cost. And I connected it to the house with a pea gravel path and connected that to the dog area that I had revised. I think that's.
okay. And then Zoe, would you, so you had, as your front seating, really, it's your stoop. You sit outside on the stoop. So the last destinations I'd like you to show are a yoga platform on the hillside. And you could use the blue for that because that's our hardscaping. And then a future shed near the road.
Yep. So these are things that I actually still haven't implemented, but I have on my design so that I know that this is where they eventually could go. All right.
All right. Now would you connect your rooms with the path to create your circuit?
And I am going to use green for this because I wanted to just have a mode path. So here is the path. Mine is about 6 feet wide. It's actually quite wide for a primary path. It goes all the way along here. It circuits my my septic area. Then, as Heather mentioned, this is just attached. The two rooms are attached. I'll show you later how we actually showed that. And then the rest of the path kind of continues under the eave of the house here. Actually, that's blue because that's a hardscaped.
And then connect the yoga area and the shed.
Then I actually have a subsidiary path here, so it's a little smaller. That goes to this area where I want to do something. And then up this hillside. So remember, we stopped the regulating lines where there was a slope because I could no longer use that land in the same way. So up here, I created kind of a curving path that goes into, and actually that's much too wide. But a curving path that goes into this yoga area. And I lined it with branches from fallen trees. I like to use a lot of on-site materials.
Okay.
The not filled in rectangle, I just see somebody ask that. This is a dog run, so it has a fence around it, but actually the inside of it is turf grass.
Yeah, great. So we don't need to go through this, but because I think everybody got the point when I filled in everything yellow, but now you want to know that everything that is not blue or green on that drawing that Zoe made is planted with native plants. And we're going to show you a picture of what it looks like, or a couple of pictures after you do the same exercise. And remember, those are generally too tall to walk on. So the grass is important as a path and destination. That's where you're with the parts that you're walking on. All right, thank you, Zoe. Everyone ready for your turn?
Oh, I have to share.
Zoe's going to share the instructions, but I'm going to start talking and tell you about it beforehand. So I'm going to talk you through the steps and you can go at your own pace, but remember, quick, messy, and don't erase. So you're going to start with a fresh copy of the aerial view of your yard. And you've got only 5 minutes again. So are you ready? All right. Now, first add regulating lines extending from the exterior walls and main doors. All right, next, I want you to indicate key views with an X about 15 feet from the windows, or if you can't see 15 feet as far as you can see. Third, you're going to roughly sketch your existing hardscaping. So outbuildings, your driveway, things like that, destinations that you plan to keep. Don't sketch anything that you may move. All right, now I want you to imagine your circuit. Now you did this already one time, but did the regulating lines and views suggest any changes to your circuit or where your destinations are placed? So now sketch the destinations, but this time move or enlarge them or make them smaller to align with the regulating lines and maximize the views. You saw how Zoe created that circle was really in an area created absolutely by the regulating lines, and similarly, her patio fit within regulating lines. So, and remember that you're going to include at least one destination at the far edge of your circuit, which is really the far edge of your yard or the sort of usable area of yard around your house, and seating options for both sun and shade. All right, after you've done those destinations, and remember they should be some kind of a geometric shape that feels good to arrive at, you are going to connect your rooms with paths to create your circuit. And so I haven't looked at the timer, so you tell me when time's up.
I was just responding to a couple of questions. All right, you guys have about another 2 minutes. I see a couple people have put in what to do with existing concrete patios. That's a great question. We're actually gonna, I think, be writing about it, Heather, next week. Maybe in 2 weeks.
I don't think so, but
it's something that one of my clients is dealing with. Heather, how do you want to answer?
I can answer that question though. I think you have to look at it two ways. And Zoe showed you her example. She had a kind of tile
I just picked up the
paver patio that she didn't like, so she pulled it all up, and she ended up planting there. We'll come back to that in a moment. So I think you have to decide: are you going to? And it's a financial question as well as an aesthetic question. And I always think there's an aesthetic solution, even if you don't have the means to do what would be ideal. So you either just incorporate it into your drawing, or you ignore it if you plan to remove it.
So yeah, and just real quick on that, generally we're not answering questions, but this was one that is good. So Elizabeth said that you already have a foundation for the kind of structure you might want. So a sauna or a shed. So one thing is you could think bigger about what destinations you eventually want to have, and maybe that becomes something for that. Another, you could get rid of it. You're jackhammering it. That's a little hard. And you might in your overall plan think in 5 years you want to get rid of it, but for now you're not so sure. And a great way to kind of soften concrete patios, there's two kind of quick options that come to mind. One is using container plantings. So get a bunch of different sized pots and use those to kind of soften the edges so it's not this harsh rectangle. Another way to make a concrete pad, or like one of our clients students had a driveway that they didn't like, but they couldn't get rid of, is to paint it. So there's, you could paint an interesting design on it or a bright color, and you really lean in and actually make it pop more than hide it. So there's some different ideas. All right, we're going to continue on. And this one is going to be recorded for anybody who has to drop right now. We will be sending the recording out later this week. Okay, so here we go. Heather, back to you.
All right.
A lot of great
questions. Voila, I think it's everybody put your pens down. And as Zoe mentioned, after the workshop, we're we're going to recommend that you test your preliminary designs with landscape flags and adjust them on the ground. So another great way to test your design is to actually bring a chair outside with you, or if you already have some outdoor furniture and you're up for moving it, like Zoe did here on the left, you can do that as well. This was helpful because Zoe first put the couch facing away from the window, as you can see on the but as you can see on the right, she turned it around, and it's much more inviting to put the sofa facing you, or even chairs facing you, because they sort of pull you out in terms of the view. So also you're going to walk your marked paths many, many, many times from both directions, as we talked about before. And note where your eyes fall. So how does it feel? So as you walk along the paths or you sit in your different seating options, what do you see that's pleasing? What do you see that's unattractive? And how could you hide that with foliage or adjusting the path or seating location? So these are both pictures of the same path leading to Zoe's patio from her back door. And you can see how different it feels when approached from one direction versus the other. In fact, if I hadn't told you, it'd probably not be clear that this is even the same path, but it's exactly the same area. So the next section, yes?
Well, I was just going to say,
Zoe, did you have a
we're
comment?
planning a workshop on small rooms, but we're also going to be teaching one in August on using woody plants. And this area right next to the house where you can see my AC unit and stuff like that, I used ferns and a lot of shrubs to actually hide that whole area. So as you're looking at this picture, this was when I put the patio in, but before all the plants and structure had come in. And so
and we're going to be showing that in the next demo. So that's a good point.
Yes. And we're going to do a whole workshop focused on this. So we hope you guys will come along for the ride. Okay, go ahead, Heather.
All right, so adding structure. So we're going to focus on two main things, enclosure and pause. So your last exercise is going to be to add to one of your sketches. So think about which of the two you've done, incorporating as many trees and shrubs as possible. So if you've been reading my newsletter, you know that I think everyone should add more trees and shrubs to their yard. Woody plants create privacy, they blur edges, they borrow views, they divide space into rooms, they create shade, they act as focal points, and create pause and surprise. So plus, as Zoe said earlier, they tend to contribute more to biodiversity than forbs, perennials, and grasses.
1 second, Heather. Apparently there's a sharing issue. Let me just share again.
Okay.
Okay. Carol, let me know. Hopefully that's better. And Heather, go ahead.
Okay, I can see it. I don't know. Can everyone else?
We're just going to assume and move forward because we don't want to run out of time.
Okay. All right. So about trees and shrubs, as I was saying, most importantly, in terms of the design, they create a sense of enclosure. Okay. In Kent's research, enclosure actually ranked #1 among attributes of a restorative landscape. So this shouldn't really be surprising because the root of the word garden is the same as the root as the word guard. Gardens were created as refuges. So Kent describes enclosure as encapsulating while revealing the immediate surroundings. In other words, you want a little perspective so you can see something's coming at you, but you also want a feeling of closeness and security. So many people have small gardens, and those actually can be among the best gardens. We sometimes assume, both in interiors and in gardens, that openness will make a space feel more comfortable. But it's often the reverse. You can see that this small garden here is packed with elements: a bench, a reflecting pool, stone paving, and lots of lush vegetation. And it looks like a cool, delightful place to stroll or sit. In contrast, the way many American suburbs have been developed, we often have big swaths of lawn without any enclosure that leave people feeling exposed. And to create privacy, many people surround their yard with fences. But fences can make you feel more closed in than enclosed. And that's why so many gorgeous gardens, fences are covered with greenery, vines or shrubs or trees. And that's something I'd really like you all to think about. In addition, a sense of enclosure can be created with a privacy hedge. I love a privacy hedge in a front yard. So either a trimmed hedge or a tapestry hedge like the one here that I photographed in England. Soon we'll show you how Zoe planted a mixed hedge along the road in front of her house to create a privacy from the road. The yard on the right is another example of a long, narrow urban garden where the walls are covered with greenery, providing a sense of enclosure. You can see that the plants also divide what could feel like a bowling alley into well-proportioned squares and rectangles, each with seating. You see in the foreground, there's the spun fiberglass chairs and table overlooking the pond. There's an Adirondack chair facing us, sort of pulling us back in the midground. And then there's also seating beyond the trees in the back section of the yard. So this yard gives you a good example of how you use plants to divide the room into different the space into different rooms. In the next example, Zoe, show the next picture. You can see how we create pause or meditation. So there's enclosure, and then this aspect of pause is a little bit different, although sometimes they overlap. And it's another example of an aspect of traditional landscape design that was supported by Kent's research. One way to create surprise is in the transition between two enclosed spaces. So the transition can give you a little moment of wow, either because the divider stops you in your tracks or because a focal point on the far side hints at the surprise in store for you on the other side. You can also create wow moments with other garden features like sculpture or water features, for example. But for today, we'd like you to think mostly about how you're going to use shrubs and trees to separate your garden rooms. And this creates pause between rooms and is another way to make your yard feel larger. So earlier I showed you a view looking outward of this award-winning London garden by Stefano Marinaz. What I want you to look at now is how he used small open amelanchier trees as well as log walls to divide the long narrow garden into separate rooms. The amelanchiers and log walls also illustrate effective use of repetition in design. And repeating elements in your garden unites your yard. And so the goal is to balance unity and surprise. And that's a topic for a whole nother workshop. Note also how Marinaz covered the side fence with vines and trees clipped so that they branch above the fence. This is a technique called pleaching to add a sense of enclosure while blurring the boundaries. All right, so now we're going to show you how this works in practice. Zoe, are you ready for your final exercise? All right, so Zoe's going to pull up the drawing that she completed in the last exercise. And you all are going to do the same thing after we've shown you with Zoe as an example. So what you're going to do is you're going to add shrubs and trees to your plan to create enclosure, pause, and views. All right, so we're going to use Zoe's lot, and she has this rough layout. Zoe, I'd like you to start with areas that need privacy, a sense of enclosure. So why don't you use another color just so we can see? So the big area, red would be good, is all along the front of Zoe's house, which is fairly close to the road. So Zoe, please use squiggles to indicate a tapestry hedge of shrubs that you planted. And as you're drawing it, just tell us a few of the.
Yeah, so someone asked about noise. So hedges and tall grasses really reduce noise as well. So I'm close to a road, so this actually served both privacy and noise. I'm in the Northeast. I used bayberry, gray dogwood, winterberry, and I sprinkled in some smooth hydrangea for some floral interest. And then actually this is all sloped here. And so I added another layer here for erosion control of flowering raspberry, purple flowering raspberry, which spreads. And so I just added a few and I'm letting it grow over the years. Okay.
Great, thank you. Or just a note on that person, the noise, we've got a good newsletter. If you go to our archive and put noise in the search, you can read about ways of particularly planting for road noise. All right, now, Zoe, would you put some shrubs to make the patio back more private? So you block the view of the patio, especially the hot tub from the driveway.
Yeah, the hot tub is right around where that X is. So I put a bunch of gray dogwoods there. And again, that unity, that repetition kind of ties it in with the front.
Great. Now let's add some shrubs for screening within the garden. So in the picture we showed, you could see your AC unit. So now between the back of the house and the patio, add shrubs to hide the AC unit, the hose bib, and so on. And actually you created a little planting area, seeding area back there
I have
for,
a propagation station here. I'm going to get rid of that because it's red. So
yes.
but I have a propagation station there. So I used elderberry and a bunch of viburnums and some blueberry, these berry flowering things that I want near the house to do that. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, now add some shrubs and vines to screen the view of the fence around the dog run from the patio. Okay, now I want you to add some paws and further define your rooms. Okay, so now the patio and the games lawn abut each other, but by putting dense shrubs on either side, you created a doorway between them. Would you show how that works?
I repeated elderberry here and some oak leaf hydrangea and arrowwood viburnum and some other smaller shrubs.
And for those of you with very small yards, you saw in the examples how, you know, I still consider it to be a path, this sort of gateway between the two rooms there. So you don't always have to have a long path. It can just be a doorway. All right. So another way of creating pause is was to define the entry to your property with dogwoods on either side of the end of your driveway. So would you put a circle with a plus sign in the middle to indicate these trees? That's how you indicate adding trees. So there's a dogwood and there's another dogwood.
They're like 5 feet tall.
All right,
now,
then let's now let's add some shrubs and trees to improve the view. You significantly improved the view from the front windows when you added the tapestry hedge along the road. But would you improve the back view now?
Yep. So I added.
You improved it by moving the dog run, and centering your seating. But what else did you do with shrubs and trees?
I added 2 eastern redbuds up on the hill. They're beautiful in spring. And then I also added a kind of a curved row of red osier dogwood in front of that, which has really bright red bark in winter. And so that was a way of adding some visual interest there. And then here, my office where I'm sitting right now looks out this way. And so I added a witch hazel here. It's going to be bright yellow in fall and have some fall interest. And I've now become obsessed with woody plants as I've realized more of how they're important for everything. And so I have added some tree here. I've started adding more privacy again for my office by incorporating more shrubs in here. It's also helping with the sound. And there's a whole bunch of other places, but I think that's all we have time for.
Great. All right. Thank you. That's it. Voila. Excellent, Zoe. Now it's everyone else's turn.
Okay.
All right, so it's your turn, everyone, to do what Zoe just did. So you're going to have 5 minutes again. And just as I did with Zoe, I'm going to read the instructions while you sketch. You can go at my pace or at your own. So first, pick your favorite of your 2 earlier sketches. All right, now I want you to add shrubs, squiggles, or trees, a circle with a plus to add. Let's think about enclosure and privacy first. So if you have a fence, you know, you're actually going to make your yard feel bigger if you plan to plant all along that fence, vines and trees and shrubs. Think about
don't worry about making your space smaller with plants. It really is it's a big trick, but it makes it feel a lot bigger.
Yeah.
Really hard for people.
So
We like to put all our shrubs right against the foundation and make everything really tight in, but see if you can take up more space. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
but think about you want a front privacy hedge. Where else can you add privacy? Sometimes you need the tallness of trees, sometimes shrubs which grow to sort of 6 feet are sufficient. Now think about screening, hiding unattractive views. Where can you add shrubs and trees for that? Next, think about pause or surprise. So between two garden rooms, those transitions, or a bend in the path so you don't see the other side of the path, or two trees at the entrance to your property or to the entrance of a section of your yard to create that feeling of pause. Next, I want you to think about your views from the inside. So is there something that could use a green focal point? Or a focal point that is, the red osier dogwoods that Zoe put in would be red against the snow. That, you could do that with Ilex verticillata. Think about your views. I have used the trick of just putting trees in, 20 feet from a window in the middle, a lovely tree that you can look at from the window, just as Zoe showed you with her witch hazel that she put in there. All right, and then lastly, don't forget to revisit the spot that you picked in the Less Lawn, More Life Challenge number 2. So maybe it becomes a moment of pause or something you want to highlight from a window. Think about how trees or shrubs could help anchor it or frame it or give it more presence in your design. How are we doing for time, Zoe?
About no 30 seconds or a minute.
Okay.
So while folks finish, I'm going to address one question I just saw come up a few times, which is people
Mhm.
asking about the book about restorative landscapes, Doug Kent. There's actually no book about this. Heather, one of the things that makes our newsletter that I love about our newsletter is that it's research-based. So it's advice column. People write in with questions, and Heather does a ton of research on what research has been done and published. And so Doug Kent's work is academic. It comes from, it's published from his work with his students. And we've translated it into this form. So Heather and I are actually working on a book, but it probably won't come out until next year. So for now, our newsletter is really the place for you to get the answers for that. So you can watch this recording again, or you can search our archive for Doug Kent, or I think Yardinalities was one of the most recent ones where we talked about this. So you can find out a little bit more information, but this is, yeah,
actually, Doug's research is not published in any one place. I based this on a presentation of his that I participated in.
Yeah. All right, so that's the time for your last exercise. So time's up, pens down. And this is the beginning. You're going to do this more times on your own time and overtime. So you did it. If you did the exercises, you now have a preliminary layout. So congratulations. And just remember, you cannot mess this up. First of all, this is a draft and only you need to understand it. But also as you go, you can move plants. I'm going to talk more about this, but like you can move plants, you can change things. This is really all an experiment. And so more than anything, we hope to empower with all of you with confidence to try things out and test things out on the ground, and just know that you can change and you can not mess things up. So we moved quickly and you took in a lot. So here's a quick recap of the key ideas that you experimented with today. So you worked on 7 out of the 10 restorative landscape attributes. These aren't guaranteed just by planting natives, but they make your yard feel good to be in. And we hope you understand now why it's so important to us, and why we think it's important to you. So if you've wondered what the other 3 restorative attributes are, those are about the senses, sound and ambient noise and water. And they show up when you plant more natives, like planting quaking aspen for the sound of the rustling leaves, and by adding water features. And water is critical for wildlife habitat. So everyone, no matter how big your space is, you should have a moving water feature, so like a small bubbler. You also used 7 traditional design principles, and you'll work with those again as you revise your plan and you keep iterating on this. So how does all this come together and actually help you transform your yard? So let's go back to challenge number 2 for a second from Less Lawn, More Life. You picked a spot, just one, and that was intentional. Not because that one patch would change everything overnight, but because starting somewhere helps you build momentum. But after today, you've now got those tools to start turning that one spot into part of a bigger vision. So more importantly, you know how to keep going without getting overwhelmed. So most people start with perennials, the last stage of these 4 stages. And honestly, that's a great place to begin. But if you want to rewild your whole yard, you need a plan that shows where everything fits, the people, the plants, and all. So here's how that plan breaks down. You start with your overall layout, where you'll walk, sit, eat, and rest, and how you'll shape your movement. So that's what we worked on today. And woody plants, specifically where they're going, that's part of that overall layout. So number 2, you're going to define your planting zones. So a zone might be defined by function, like privacy or views. So I have a zone that is my tapestry hedge, my privacy hedge, that's a zone. Or it could be defined by condition. So where is it sunny, shady, moist? That'll help you decide what type of native plants fits best in that area. So I have a woodland garden across from my tapestry because it's shaded, and so I have woodland plants there. Let me think. I have my sunny meadow area. I have a rain garden in a wet zone. So for many of you with mosquitoes, think about how you could soak up soggy spots in your yard with a rain garden. That's a functional zone. So then the third, for each zone, you'll choose your woody plants. So these are your trees and shrubs. They create the structure, the screening, the focal points. So you will go back, you'll revise your overall layout, you'll kind of draw on it, maybe your sun and shade conditions, you'll start labeling things zone A through, I don't know, I have like probably, N number of zones. I have a lot of zones. So you start labeling your zones, and then you pick one zone. You're like, or you look at it and you're like, I am going to prioritize this zone because I need privacy more than anything else, or I need noise reduction more than anything else, or I really need to solve those mosquitoes, or my yard is actually kind of fine and I just want a place for pollinators to bring me joy. So that's how you decide on that zone. So you choose your woody plants, then you choose your perennials and grasses. The perennials and grasses fill in each zone. They bring the seasonal color, the texture, the habitat. So as a whole, this step-by-step structure is what makes it possible to move forward. So even if you're just doing one zone or one bed or 5 plants at a time. And the best part is that you're allowed to change your mind. So you can move plants, you'll revise your layout, and that's not failure, that's the design process. And this framework lets you make intentional decisions and even break the rules when it serves your vision, because you understand how all the pieces work together and why you're making decisions, whether or not it's following rules or breaking them. So that brings us to something one of my favorite troublemakers once said, which is know the rules well so you can break them effectively, the Dalai Lama the 14th. So by now you have got a handle on the core pieces of a great layout, what makes a space feel inviting, what gives it structure, how to connect it all. And that means that you can start experimenting with confidence, knowing what will support people, wildlife, and your long-term vision. So if you're feeling excited, but also a little overwhelmed, like, okay, but how do I actually start? Once you've got a good sense of your overall layout and you feel good about one section of it, it's time to get planting. So everything that's not a path or destination in your layout will eventually be planted. For today, you might just focus on the one spot you chose for Less Lawn, More Life. But now that you've got a bigger plan, you'll know what to tackle this fall or next year or even later. So this is what it looked like a year after I started my plan, one zone at a time. So on the left is my woodland garden in spring. That's the front of my house. And on the right is the view from my bedrooms. That's that circular lawn that you saw on the on the layout. So it has a native mint border, my anti-tick solution. We do have an article about that if you search the archive. And then on the right, you can see the yellow that's peeking out. That's that first year of the meadow over the septic area. But it didn't happen all at once. And that's the point. You start with one zone and you build as you go. And the process can be fun and beautiful and totally doable, especially with the right support. And so we'd love to help you get there, whether it's through our free newsletter, which we hope that you all sign up for, the support resources that we're building at Planet Wild, which I'll talk more about in a second, or even just mentally, just know we're here cheering you on the next time you come home with a trunk full of native plants. Like, it just brings us the absolute most joy. So if you're looking for a little more structure or clarity about what to do next, I'm involved in creating something new just for that. So this is something I'm helping develop. It's called the Wilder Action Plan from Planet Wild. Some of you may have already heard about it. For others, this is going to be totally new. Nobody has seen it yet because we are building it right now. And so if you're feeling motivated but unsure of how to move forward, this is for you. So the Wilder Action Plan brings together everything Heather and I have learned from our coaching and teaching DIY rewilders, and it's alongside Planet Wild's deep expertise in ecological installation and science. I have like goosebumps right now. This is the first time I'm talking about this publicly, but it is so exciting. And so it weaves all of that together into this personalized site-specific action guide. So it's something that's not just informative, it actually helps you take the steps in your own yard. So like, one of the steps is learning about your land. And we tell you about your ecoregion. We tell you about some of the keystone species there. We tell you about how to get familiar with it. So for folks who are just starting, that might be the right level. That's one piece of many. There's also a lot of other things. But for other folks who have been rewilding or know you have a particular area that is like a problem area, we also have an option that's focused on helping you come up with plants and design for a particular area or particular zone. So it's not a generic template, it's regional, it's practical, and it's grounded in your goals. So it comes out of the Wilder score. And I'm just, so thrilled to be a part of building this, because where was this when I started this years ago? But it's really cool that it's here now. And so we'll be announcing it soon. So if you want to first access, you can sign up on the website. June will drop that in the chat. And quickly to summarize next steps, keep going with Less Lawn, More Life Challenge. It keeps pushing you forward, and there's some really exciting experts coming up. Refine your layout and test it on the ground. So walk it, mark it, move things, get out there, pretend to be a tree or a shrub to figure out where it should go or how big it should be. Map your planting zones and decide which ones to prioritize. Maybe it's based on privacy or visual impact or solving functional challenges like where to place a rain garden for that soggy spot. So map them out and figure out what you're going to prioritize. And maybe you have a sense of like, this year I'm going to do this, next year I'm going to do this, and that's as far as you get. Then start with just one zone. For this summer, maybe you're focusing just on that spot from challenge number 2, but now you know how it integrates into the whole, or you will as you iterate on your designs. Please sign up for our newsletter at designyourwild.com. So we're going to answer a bunch of the questions that we weren't able to answer for the workshop there. And we also offer more workshops that are really based on like what questions we get from people, what we found helpful. And so sign up and you'll hear more about those. And then lastly, if you want more personalized support, sign up to hear about the Wilder Action Plan as we roll it out. All right, so before we let you go, we promised to let you go at 7. It's a couple minutes there. So to reinforce your learning, please reflect on today's workshop in the chat. Would you please write one thing you learned in this workshop? Again, this is really for you. We want to solidify. This is like a neural trick. Put one thing that you learned in the workshop. Your design should—
I see destination.
How important water feature is to a restorative landscape, zones, developing
Human-centered design.
Yep, how not to be overwhelmed. Yes. Yeah, have a plan and then just chip away at it, but know how it's fitting into the whole. Rooms, regulating lines, native mint as a tick solution, taking a fresh look at your spaces. This is so great. Looking at the design
Putting
from
in
the
a yoga area,
Oh my goodness, these are so fantastic. Okay. Thank you, everyone.
enclosure and pause.
This is great. Start small with a plan. Yeah. Thank you all so much. So go back, iterate on this, figure out what you're going to tackle right now. And we're just so excited that all of you are along for this ride. Every native plant we get in the ground is a huge win. And the more time you spend outside is a huge win. And so it all comes together. So thank you, everyone. All right. And we'll send you the
Thank
recording
you.
in a couple days. All right.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.